Aristotle Socrates Onassis, commonly called Ari or Aristo Onassis, was a prominent Greek shipping magnate. Early life: Onassis was born in Karatas, a suburb of Smyrna, to Socrates and Penelope Dologu. Onassis had one full sister, Artemis, and two half-sisters, Kaliroi and Merope, by his father's second marriage following Penelope's death. Socrates Onassis came from the village of Moutalaski, near Cappadocia in Asia Minor, which is the present-day city of Kayseri, in central Turkey. A successful shipping entrepreneur, he was able to send his children to prestigious schools. At the age of 16, Aristotle Onassis spoke 4 languages, Greek, Turkish, Spanish, and English, when he graduated from the local evangelical Greek school. After being briefly administered by Greece in the aftermath of the Allied victory in World War I, Smyrna was retaken by Turkey and the Onassis family's substantial property holdings were lost, causing them to become refugees fleeing to Greece after the Great Fire of Smyrna. During this period, Aristotle Onassis lost 3 uncles, an aunt and her husband Chrysostomos Konialidis and their daughter, who were burned to death in a church in Thyatira where 500 Christians were seeking shelter from the Great Fire of Smyrna. In 1923, Aristotle Onassis left for Buenos Aires, Argentina, by Northern passport, and got his first job with the British United River Plate Telephone Company. Business: Argentina. Onassis founded Olympic Airways, the Greek national carrier, in 1957. Onassis made large profits when the big oil companies like Mobil, Socony, and Texaco signed long-term contracts at fixed prices with him for the use of his fleet, while having trouble managing their own fleets, which operated under U.S. flags and thus at high cost. Onassis's fleet had Panamanian flags and sailed tax-free while operating at low cost. Because of this, Onassis could turn a profit in every transaction, even though he charged one of the lowest prices in the merchant navy market. He could recoup the cost of a tanker with a 6-month contract. The rest of the service life of the tanker, usually 20 years, yielded high profits. Onassis owned a fleet of freighters and tankers that exceeded 70 vessels. Stocks accounted for 1/3 of his capital, held in oil companies in the USA, the Middle East, and Venezuela. He also owned additional shares that secured his control of 95 multinational businesses on 5 continents. He owned gold processing plants in Argentina and Uruguay and a large share in an airline in Latin America and $4 million worth of investments in Brazil. Also, he owned companies like Olympic Maritime and Olympic Tourist, a chemical company in Persia, apartments in Paris, London, Monte Carlo, Athens, and Acapulco, a castle in South France, the Olympic Tower, another building in Sutton Place, Olympic Airways and Air Navigation, the islands Scorpios and Sparta, the yacht Christina and, finally, deposit accounts and accounts in treasuries in 217 banks in the whole world. Saudi Arabia: he was in final talks with the King of Saudi Arabia for securing a tanker transport deal during the oil boom of the 1950s. Since the Arabian-American Oil Company had a monopoly on Saudi oil by a concession agreement, the U.S. government was alarmed by the tanker deal. By 1954, a specific U.S. policy for Saudi Arabia, in addition to strengthening the U.S. special position, was to take all appropriate measures to bring about the cancellation of an agreement between the Saudi government and Aristotle Onassis to transport Saudi oil on his tankers and in any case, to make the agreement ineffective. Doc 128, the arrangement would have ended monopoly control of Saudi Arabia's oil by American oil companies, but was forestalled by the U.S. government. For this reason he became a target of the U.S. government, and in 1954, the FBI investigated Onassis for fraud against the U.S. government. He was charged with violating the citizenship provision of the shipping laws, which require that all ships displaying the U.S. flag be owned by U.S. citizens. Onassis entered a guilty plea and paid $7 million. Whaling: between 1950 and 1956, Onassis had success whaling off the Peruvian coast. His first expedition made a net profit of $4.5 million. That business ended when the Norwegian Whaling Gazette made accusations based on sailors' testimonials, such as one given by Bruno Schallegek, who worked on the factory ship Olympic Challenger. Pieces of fresh meat from the 124 whales we killed yesterday still remains on the deck. Among them all, just one could be considered adult. All animals that pass within the range of the harpoon are killed in cold blood. The venture came to an end after the business was sold to Kyokuyo Hogai Kesha Whaling Company, one of the biggest Japanese whaling companies, for $8.5 million. The Greek Colonel Affair. According to the Evans biography, 4 days after he married Jacqueline Kennedy in October 1968, Onassis was in close discussions with Greek Prime Minister Colonel George Papadopoulos, who Evans states was on Onassis's extensive bribery list. Onassis and Papadopoulos were planning what they referred to as the greatest business in Greece. This project involved building an oil refinery, shipyards, power plants, and several aluminum facilities. The project was officially named the Omega Project. The project was heavily criticized by people such as Helen Vlachos, a journalist from Athens. The Omega Project negotiations with the Papadopoulos government ended with Onassis losing part of the project to his competitor Stavros Niarchos. The failure was due partly to opposition from influential people within the military junta, such as Ioannis Orlandos Rodinos, Deputy Minister of Economic Coordination, who opposed Onassis's offers in preference to Niarchos. Relationships and family. Athena Livanos. Onassis married Athena Livanos, daughter of shipping magnate Stavros G. Livanos and Arietta Zafrakakis, on December 28, 1946. Their son, Alexander, and daughter Christina, after whom Onassis named his legendary superyacht, were both born in New York City. To Onassis, his marriage to Athena was more than the fulfillment of his ambitions. He also felt that the marriage dealt a blow to his father-in-law and the old-money Greek traditionalists who held Onassis in very low esteem. Maria Callas. Despite the fact they were both married, Onassis and opera diva Maria Callas embarked on an affair. They had met in 1957 during a party in Venice promoted by Elsa Maxwell. After this first encounter, Onassis commented to Spyros Skouras, "There was just a natural curiosity. After all, we were the most famous Greeks alive in the world." Jacqueline Bouvier Kennedy. Onassis ended his relationship with Callas to marry Jacqueline Kennedy, widow of U.S. President John F. Kennedy, on October 20, 1968. They married on Onassis' privately owned island, Scorpios. According to Peter Evans, Onassis offered Mrs. Kennedy US $3 million to replace her Kennedy Trust Fund, which she would lose because she was remarrying. After Onassis' death, she would receive a settlement of $26 million US, $150,000 US each year for the rest of her life. The whole marital contract was discussed with Ted Kennedy and later reviewed by Andra Copyright Mayer, her financial consultant. Onassis' daughter Christina made clear that she disliked Jacqueline Kennedy, and after Alexander's death, she convinced Aristotle that Jacqueline had some kind of curse due to John and Robert Kennedy's murders. During his marriage to Jackie, the couple inhabited 6 different residences: her 15-room Fifth Avenue apartment in New York City, her horse farm in New Jersey, his Ave Foch apartment in Paris, his house in Athens, his private island in Greece named Scorpios, and his 325-foot luxury yacht the Christina. Death and legacy. Onassis died at age 69, on March 15, 1975 at the American Hospital of Paris in Neuilly-sur-Seine, France, of respiratory failure, a complication of the myasthenia gravis that he had been suffering from during the last years of his life. According to his will, his daughter Christina was to inherit 55% of the Onassis fortune while the other 45% was to be used as funds for the Alexander S. Onassis Foundation set up to honor his son Alexander Onassis. This 45% was the share his son Alexander would have inherited had he not died in 1973. Aristotle Onassis, wishing to honor the memory of his son through the establishment of a public benefit foundation, directed in his handwritten will that his fortune should be equally divided between the foundation to be established, which was to bear the name of Alexander S. Onassis, and his daughter Christina on the explicit condition that the two portions would remain independent of each other. Thus, 45% of his fortune went to the foundation, being the portion that he would have bequeathed to his son Alexander, and the remaining 55% went to his daughter Christina. After Onassis's death, the executors of his will, among whom were several of his close colleagues, proceeded to take all the measures necessary to establish the newly constituted foundation as a legal entity, named the Alexander S. Onassis Public Benefit Foundation. In implementation of the testator's wishes, the foundation was established in Vaduz, Liechtenstein, in compliance with whose laws two foundations were established, the Business Foundation, which was to serve purely business purposes, and the Public Benefit Foundation, which was to be for public benefit purposes only. The reason was to keep the business activities of the one separate from the work of the other. The Business Foundation engages in shipping and other business, and its sole beneficiary is the Public Benefit Foundation. In accordance with Onassis's will, the latter spends about 40% of the net annual profits of the Business Foundation, and the remainder is reinvested. Jackie Kennedy Onassis also received her share of the estate, settling for a reported $10 million, which was negotiated by her brother-in-law Ted Kennedy. Christina's share has since passed to her only child Athena, making Athena one of the wealthiest women in the world. See also: Greek shipping, Scorpios, Christina O. Stavros Niarchos, notes. References: OENASAS, Pratoporos Taos Nautilia Onassis, Pioneer and Shipping, by George M. Fustanos, 2006. ISBN 960-89400-0-1. Greek and English on opposite pages. External links: Aristotle Onassis, The Golden Greek, FBI file on Aristotle Onassis, Onassis, the richest man in the world at imdb.com.